The 19th century began with Tsar Alexander I on the throne of Russia. His reign marked the beginning of a century filled with dramatic changes and significant events that would shape the future of the Russian Empire. He was a complex figure, both reforming and repressive. Alexander I introduced several liberal reforms, including educational improvements and limited administrative changes, but he also maintained a strong autocratic rule. He defeated Napoleon's invasion in 1812, a defining moment in Russian history. The Russian victory in the Patriotic War of 1812 not only saved the country from foreign domination, but also boosted national pride and unity. This victory cemented Russia's status as a European power. The subsequent Congress of Vienna in 1815 further established Russia's influence in European affairs, making it one of the key players in the continent's political landscape. However, his later years saw a turn towards conservatism. Disillusioned by the challenges of reform, Alexander I became more repressive, curbing freedoms and strengthening the autocratic system. Alexander's successor, Nicholas I, was a staunch autocrat. Nicholas I's reign was characterized by a rigid adherence to autocratic principles and a resistance to any form of liberalization. He famously declared orthodoxy, autocracy, nationality as the guiding principles of his reign. This triad became the ideological foundation of his rule, emphasizing the importance of the Russian Orthodox Church, absolute monarchical power, and nationalistic pride. His reign saw the Decembrist Revolt of 1825, a failed uprising by liberal officers. The revolt, though unsuccessful, was significant as it highlighted the growing desire for political reform and the dissatisfaction with autocratic rule. This event foreshadowed the growing discontent among Russia's intellectuals and elites. The Decembrist revolt inspired future generations of revolutionaries and reformers who sought to challenge the autocratic system. Nicholas's reign also saw the Crimean War from 1853 to 1856, a humiliating defeat that exposed Russia's military weaknesses. The war revealed the inefficiencies and backwardness of the Russian military and administrative systems. The Crimean War's aftermath forced Russia to confront its backwardness. The defeat prompted a period of introspection and highlighted the need for comprehensive reforms to modernize the empire. Tsar Alexander II, Nicholas's son, implemented significant reforms. Recognizing the need for change, Alexander II embarked on a series of reforms aimed at modernizing Russia and addressing its social and economic issues. The most notable was the emancipation of the serfs in 1861. This landmark reform freed millions of serfs, granting them personal liberty and the right to own property. This momentous act freed millions from centuries of bonded labor. However, the emancipation also brought new challenges, as many freed serfs struggled to secure land and faced economic hardships. However, it did not fully solve the problems of land ownership and rural poverty. The reforms fell short of providing adequate land and resources to the newly freed serfs, leading to widespread discontent and economic difficulties. Alexander II's reforms, while substantial, were not enough to quell the growing revolutionary ferment. The desire for more radical changes continued to grow, leading to increased political unrest and revolutionary activities. His assassination in 1881 by revolutionaries marked a turning point. The violent act underscored the deep-seated discontent and the lengths to which revolutionaries were willing to go to achieve their goals. It ushered in an era of heightened repression and reaction under Alexander III. In response to his father's assassination, Alexander III implemented strict measures to suppress revolutionary activities and maintain autocratic control. The late 19th century saw the rise of industrialization and urbanization in Russia, bringing with them new social problems and new revolutionary movements. The rapid changes in society created a fertile ground for revolutionary ideas and movements, setting the stage for the dramatic events of the early 20th century. The late 19th century was a period of rapid industrialization and social change in Russia. The country was undergoing a transformation that would lay the groundwork for significant political and social upheaval. The growth of factories and cities led to the emergence of a new working class. This burgeoning workforce was concentrated in urban areas where the pace of life was fast and the conditions were often grueling. This working class faced harsh conditions, long hours, and low wages. Many workers toiled in unsafe environments with little to no protection or rights, leading to widespread dissatisfaction and unrest. They became increasingly receptive to radical ideas, including Marxism. The writings of Karl Marx and other revolutionary thinkers began to circulate among the workers, fueling their desire for change and justice. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the formation of various revolutionary groups in Russia. These groups were diverse in their ideologies but united in their opposition to the autocratic Tsarist regime. These included the Social Democratic Labour Party, which would later split into the Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. The split was based on differing views on how to achieve their revolutionary goals, with the Bolsheviks favoring a more radical approach. These groups agitated for social justice, improved working conditions, and political rights. They organized strikes, protests, and other forms of resistance to challenge the existing order. In 1905, Russia faced its first revolution. This was a pivotal moment in Russian history, marking the beginning of a decade of turmoil and change. Triggered by the disastrous Russo-Japanese War and the Bloody Sunday Massacre, the 1905 revolution forced Tsar Nicholas II to make concessions. The war had exposed the weaknesses of the Russian military and government, while Bloody Sunday had shown the brutality of the regime. He agreed to establish a parliament, the Duma, and to grant some civil liberties. This was seen as a significant step forward, but it was not enough to quell the growing discontent. However, these reforms proved limited, and the Tsar retained much of his autocratic power. The Duma had limited authority, and Nicholas continued to rule with an iron fist. The period between 1905 and 1917 was one of simmering discontent. The promises of reform had not been fully realized, and many Russians remained dissatisfied with the status quo. The Tsarist regime, despite some attempts at reform, proved unable or unwilling to address the fundamental problems facing Russia. Issues such as land distribution, workers' rights, and political representation remained unresolved. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 would prove to be the catalyst for the empire's downfall. The war placed immense strain on Russia's economy and society, leading to widespread hardship and disillusionment. The war exposed the weaknesses of the Tsarist regime and exacerbated the existing social and economic tensions. Soldiers faced horrific conditions on the front lines, while those at home dealt with food shortages, inflation, and a lack of basic necessities. This combination of factors set the stage for the revolutionary upheavals that would soon follow. World War I proved disastrous for Russia. The Russian army, poorly equipped and poorly led, suffered a series of defeats against the German army. Millions of Russian soldiers were killed or wounded in the conflict. The war also had a devastating impact on the already struggling Russian economy. The war exacerbated the existing social and economic problems in Russia. Food shortages, inflation, and widespread suffering fueled popular discontent among the people. The Tsar's absence at the front and the influence of Grigory Rasputin, a mystic who held sway over the Tsarina, further eroded public trust in the monarchy. In February 1917, a revolution erupted in Petrograd, formerly known as St. Petersburg. The February Revolution, as it became known, began with bread riots and strikes. It quickly spiraled into a mass uprising that forced Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate. The Romanov dynasty, which had ruled Russia for over 3 centuries, came to an end. The February Revolution led to the establishment of a provisional government. This government, composed of liberals and moderate socialists, sought to establish a democratic republic in Russia. However, it faced opposition from the more radical Soviets, councils of workers, soldiers, and peasants that had emerged during the revolution. The period following the February Revolution was one of intense political turmoil. The streets of Petrograd were filled with demonstrators demanding change, and the old order was crumbling under the weight of popular discontent. The provisional government, struggling to assert its authority, faced challenges from the Soviets. These Soviets, or workers' councils, were gaining influence and power, often directly opposing the decisions of the provisional government. The most powerful of these was the Petrograd Soviet, which was increasingly dominated by the Bolsheviks, a radical socialist faction led by Vladimir Lenin. Lenin's return to Russia marked a turning point as he began to galvanize the masses with his revolutionary ideas. Lenin, returning from exile in Switzerland, rallied his supporters with the slogan "Peace, Land and Bread." This slogan resonated deeply with war-weary soldiers, land-hungry peasants and urban workers struggling to survive. He promised to end the war, redistribute land to the peasants and give power to the Soviets. These promises were a direct challenge to the provisional government and appealed to the widespread desire for immediate and radical change. The Bolsheviks, capitalizing on the provisional government's weakness and the growing popular discontent, staged a coup d'état in October 1917. This event, known as the October Revolution, was a meticulously planned and executed seizure of power. The October Revolution, also known as the Bolshevik Revolution, brought the Bolsheviks to power. They quickly moved to consolidate their control, establishing a one-party state and suppressing opposition with ruthless efficiency. The Bolsheviks used propaganda, censorship and violence to eliminate their rivals and secure their hold on power. They also signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany, ending Russia's involvement in World War I. This treaty was controversial and resulted in significant territorial losses for Russia, but it allowed the Bolsheviks to focus on internal challenges. The Bolshevik seizure of power triggered a bloody civil war that would rage across Russia from 1918 to 1922. This conflict pitted the Bolsheviks against a diverse array of opponents, leading to widespread devastation and suffering. The Bolsheviks, known as the Reds, faced opposition from a variety of groups, collectively known as the Whites. The Whites included monarchists, liberals, socialists opposed to the Bolsheviks, and foreign powers who intervened in the conflict. The Whites included monarchists, liberals, socialists opposed to the Bolsheviks, and foreign powers who intervened in the conflict. Despite their differences, these groups were united in their desire to overthrow the Bolshevik regime. The Russian Civil War was a brutal conflict that claimed millions of lives. The fighting was characterized by extreme violence, with atrocities committed by both sides, leading to immense suffering for the civilian population. The Bolsheviks, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, ultimately emerged victorious. Their victory was due in part to their superior organization, their ruthless determination, and their ability to mobilize support among the peasantry. Their victory was due in part to their superior organization, their ruthless determination, and their ability to mobilize support among the peasantry. The Red Army, under the leadership of figures like Leon Trotsky, was able to outmaneuver and outfight their opponents. The Civil War had a profound impact on Russian society, leaving a legacy of violence, trauma, and social upheaval. The scars of this conflict would shape the Soviet Union for decades to come, influencing its policies and the psyche of its people.